I've got the national agreement on closing the gap, and I'm happy to table it, but I'm sure the minister's very aware of it, given that this was a significant agreement between First Nations people and the Australian government. And on page 4
so could you table that
agreement,
absolutely. If you're putting it to the officials, it just would be
absolutely.
nice
So
if
on
they
page
could have a copy.
4, it's called A New Approach. So I'd like you to just be aware that one of the excerpts of that, in fact, I'll just get this page if you like. It's quite a lengthy document. You could probably get it up online there if you wanted to see the rest of it. Minister, it's called the National Agreement on Closing the Gap.
Oh, sorry.
This is when Pat Turner stood up next to Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
And you want page 4
and
brought up?
the country lauded the fact that this was a major national agreement between First Nations organisations, peak bodies across the country, and the Prime Minister stood next to Pat Turner and said this was going to be a new beginning in terms of the way the Morrison government would be working with First Nations organisations. We now hear that the woman that Scott Morrison stood next to, Prime Minister Morrison stood next to, was Pat Turner as the head of the Coalition of Peaks, and they do not want the cashless debit card, and they do not want it to certainly become permanent. And on page 4,
so
as part of the agreement,
page 4, because it doesn't actually have.
It says, I'll read it to you, Minister, and then I'll have it tabled because I can't give it away.
Sorry, thank you.
So it says on page 4, a new approach. This agreement is a commitment from all parties to set out a future where policy making that impacts on the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is done in full and genuine partnership. That Aboriginal people need to have a much greater say in how programs and services are delivered to their people in their own places and on their own country. I will table that because from what I'm hearing in terms of the evidence, your evidence is totally contrary to the agreement in this Closing the Gap initiative.
Senator, can I make a couple of comments about that?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. That is okay. Please do.
So the Coalition of Peaks, the reason we're consulting them and talking to them is because of the commitment that the Prime Minister has made,
but
that we will listen to their voices and aspirations. It is not likely that government and the Coalition of Peaks will form agreement on every single issue, but we thought it was important to talk to them and listen to them. I'd also comment, and this is something that National Indigenous Australians Agency may have spoken about as well, it's not the only representation of Aboriginal groups or voice, but it is one. Okay. It is an important one, and that is why we spoke to them.
Yeah. So when the Prime Minister stands up next to the peak body, which the Prime Minister has now declared is the body that even Minister Ken White, and this is to you, Minister, even Minister Ken White acknowledges that this is the body, the Coalition of Peaks, that you're going to have these conversations with about decisions and legislative frameworks, all kinds of decisions that will impact First Nations people. So when they say no, that's when you say there are other First Nations organisations out there, so we'll go and listen to them.
No,
what kind of partnership is that if you don't listen?
And that's not the evidence. And Senator
if McCarthy, you don't, it is the
you're
evidence,
very passionate about this. I understand that.
It is the evidence.
It's not the evidence that was given by the officials.
We've heard that Pat Turner has said no.
The